Welcome to our District 13 State School Board District Primary Debate. We're excited to have our two candidates with us, Allison Williams and Randall Booth. We're also grateful for the members of the Utah Education Debate Coalition, which includes the United Way, the Sutherland Institute, the Hinckley Institute of Politics, the Utah Association of Public Charter Schools, and KSL. We did a coin flip before this, and it was determined that Allison would give the opening statement first. She'll have 90 seconds to do that, followed by Randy, and then we will go into the question and answer period. Everyone who's watching, we encourage you to add questions to the YouTube channel where we can ask the candidates those questions afterwards. So Allison, please give us your opening statement.
Hi, thank you for hosting this. I'd just like to introduce myself a little bit. I am a full-time mom of 5 and a part-time teacher. Just finished up distance learning for the first time, or distance teaching for the first time. I have a degree in education from Brigham Young University, and I've worked as an advocate for family-friendly education policy for many years to raise awareness of issues like student data privacy and the problems with test-based accountability. I serve as the chair of our community council and on the parent review board for the statewide year-end tests that are aligned to Common Core. And through all these experiences, I've learned that important decisions that impact our children's opportunities are being made all the time. And as parents and as taxpayers, we need to be anxiously engaged in this process. And I'm really excited for this opportunity to step up and participate in this discussion for policy at the state board level. And I look forward to this exchange of ideas. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Randy.
Thank you, Allison. It's nice to share a few minutes together with you tonight. My name is Randy Booth, and I am originally from Idaho. I'm an Idaho spud and grew up much of my younger years in Idaho, moved to Utah, and then to Portland, Oregon, where I graduated from high school. Came to Brigham Young University and loved it so much. I did go a few other places in between, but ended back here at the university where I've been now teaching for 43 years. And I'm retiring on August 1st of this year. I've been very much involved in education throughout my entire career. As a teacher, as a father involved with our children, now as a grandfather with our grandchildren. I am passionate about education, passionate about public education and the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of children. I've been privileged to serve on the NEBO Board of Education for the last 16 years, simultaneously on the Board of Trustees of Mountainland Applied Technology College, and served as the chair of the board a short time ago. It's been a very, very exciting journey, and one that I'm not ready to give up, even though I'm retiring. So I'm excited to throw myself into representing the children of the state of Utah and their parents in going after the very best education we can provide for the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you both for those opening statements. Randy, we'll stick with you for the first question. And we'd like you to identify what are those top 1 or 2 functions of the State School Board of Education?
Well, I believe that they have an obligation to promote local control. I'm so grateful for the diversity of people that are a part of the population of this great state of Utah. And I believe that the State Board of Education can enable local boards to work with parents and teachers to be in charge of their children's education, advocating for laws, rules, oversight, and funding that encourage local decision-making, with most education dollars going to the classroom, the individual school, and the local education agency.
Thank you. Allison.
So the state board has constitutionally in Utah a role to oversee education in Utah. I believe we're elected because we have an obligation to the taxpayer and directly to the citizens. And I think that's the number one priority. The state board also serves a role since the establishment of the Federal Department of Education, and under the most recent reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, called Every Student Succeeds Act, we have to submit a plan to the Federal Department of Education for approval. And that also falls under the purview of the State Board of Education. It's just as Randy emphasized, local control is really important. We've had a lot of that slip away over the years since the Department of Federal Education was established. And that really is kind of a guardian role for the sovereignty of the state, for the members of the state board to be very mindful of that.
Thank you. So you both told us a little bit about yourselves, and then also what you think those critical roles of the school board are. Allison, what in your past and in your experience do you think best qualifies you to serve on the board?
So just like Randy, I look at education through a couple of different lenses: as a parent, as a teacher, as a taxpayer. And I am passionate about education, and that is where my own education is. But also my private sector experience, I think, has given me some insights as we move into a lot more tech-supported learning. And my volunteer work, especially advocacy at the legislative side, I've really become quite familiar with legislative processes and how the legislature and the state school board can work together. And I think all of these different experiences have uniquely prepared me to serve in this role.
Randy.
I've had a lot of amazing experiences around the world where I've observed firsthand education being delivered in cities like Harare in Zimbabwe, or in Beijing, China, or in Sao Paulo, Brazil. As I've observed those settings, I have witnessed firsthand the enormous impact of education in the lives of children all over the world. And every time I come home to my own grandchildren and to the Nebo School District, where I've been serving, as I mentioned, for 16 years, I get excited about the possibilities. I know that they have a very bright future if we are committed to providing them the very best tools to embark upon that exciting journey of life. And I'm so delighted to have been a student myself, to have had teachers who were so enthusiastic and filled the world with wonder for me. I loved school. I loved studying. I loved going to college. I loved being a teacher. I've loved being a parent volunteer. I've loved being a grandparent volunteer. I've loved serving on the board and going from school to school. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to continue to represent the children of Utah.
Thank you. So as we all know, the coronavirus and the public health and economic crises that have been caused by that closed schools for much of the second half of the year. And beyond that, they've really taken a toll on the statewide budget and, of course, the education budget. The legislature was even meeting today. They're still working through what the budget will look like for education. How would you, all that said, we know that there will be losses with the education budget. How would you compensate for the losses and income? And where do you think the budget should be cut? And Randy, you are the first one on this question.
Great. Well, there's certainly no easy answers. We know that the state school board the Public Education Appropriations Committee, the Executive Appropriations Committee have all been looking at this and sifting through all of them with new ideas. Haven't quite come together on the same page yet, but we're already the lowest funded per pupil in the country. So first we need to look at all state funded programs administered by the state board. What will have the least impact on the quality education we're trying to deliver? Then we give the LEAs as much flexibility as possible to make cuts at the local level that are least impactful to student achievement. But I again believe that local control and local input on what we're going to cut is going to have the greatest impact for good for our students in the far reaches of Utah.
Thank you. Allison.
Yeah, I agree. There's no easy answer to this. These cuts are going to be really challenging for us, and it's just the reality. As I've been observing this process behind the scenes, one thing that has really stood out to me is kind of some of the disconnect between the communication between local teachers, district specialists, the State Office of Education, the State Board of Education, and the legislature. I really think that we could improve the communication channels there so that, as Randy said, we really give priority to the local voices who are on the front lines and see what the greatest needs are. I believe when you can only do a few things, you need to prioritize what's the most important things and really excel at those. These core subjects need to be prioritized, for example. But then some of, there are programs that would maybe not be considered a core subject that are of great value to a local community. And so, as Randy said, I agree, the local flexibility about how those funds could best be used is really key here. And as a state board member, the communication facilitating that would be a key role, I think.
Okay, thank you. Staying on the topic of COVID-19, as we were just mentioning, much of the school year was shut down in the latter half of last year, and there's the possibility looming that this might occur again. This was a really difficult challenge. Online learning was spotty for a lot of students. It was hard to get online curriculum and the materials and the technology that students needed. With the possibility this may happen again in the fall or the next spring, how should the State Board of Education respond to the need for better online education? And Allison, you're first on this one.
Okay, so I do think that that's been a priority of the CARES Act funding. From what I can tell, the priority is to fund internet connectivity and make sure that students have access to technology. That said, I think technology is just a tool here, and the plan can't be technology itself. I really think that that there's a lot more discussion that needs to go into this that has nothing to do with technology, that has to do with how we work with our teachers and how we prioritize, again, those most core subjects.
Thank you, Randy.
I think it's an exercise in communication for the State Board of Education. What an opportunity they have now, based on the experiences of all of the districts throughout the state, to find out what really worked and what didn't work. There was certainly much of both of those sides of the coin. And now they can be communicating with local districts, with charter schools, to determine what worked, where were the biggest challenges, and share that information statewide to ensure that all corners of the state have access to the most effective means of facing the potential challenge that may be ahead of us this fall.
A follow-up question, and maybe we'll just do 30 seconds on this. One of the challenges that we know we had was that a lot of students didn't have the devices or the online connectivity that they needed. What can the school board do to help schools, to help students, to ensure that they do have those devices and the online resources they need in case we do have to shutter schools for part of the upcoming school year? Randy.
Well, we've certainly already been working on providing access to all, both public and private funding are available to connect all of Utah's children to the internet. I recently saw a hotspot vehicle in an area with spotty service just driving through the neighborhood. And I think in the short term, we should adapt to this, but I also think we need to upgrade our infrastructure. That means faster speeds, more fiber. It's got to be a priority as we're working together with other public officials.
Allison.
I agree that if distance learning is the only way we can connect, then we've got to prioritize that. But I observed in my district and with a lot of those that I talk to that having internet access, having the computers actually wasn't one of the biggest challenges. There were kids who had access who weren't logging on. And I just want to give a great big compliment to teachers and how they handled this. I have really seen them go to great lengths to reach out in ways, not even through technology, personal letters, everything. I think no matter what we do with the technology, really the teachers are the key to the success. And I want to make sure they feel supported and they have what they need because they're the key to making any of this succeed.
Moving on to the topic that is the perennial difficult thing, the budget. Not only how we fund schools, but also how we distribute those funds. The state school board oversees and distributes more than $4 billion a year. Allison, you're first on this question. Tell us what qualifies you to manage that budget.
Right. So the power of the purse actually belongs to the legislature, and a great portion of those funds are kind of pre-allocated. They're earmarked with the legislation that is set forth for those bills. And so the role of the state school board really is an oversight role. And I do have 10 years of executive experience in the private sector overseeing those kinds of budgets, not $4 billion, millions, not billions. And I also have experience with tech contracts. And as I've reviewed the state contract for testing, for example, and things like that, I really think that there's some improvements that can be made there to make sure we don't end up in the situation we are in now in a lawsuit with one of the testing companies. I think the standard for our tech contracts needs to be improved, and I have some expertise there.
Thank you. Randy.
Well, frankly, most of the money that is going to come from the legislature is sent directly to the school districts and to the charter schools. And managing the budget that we've had with Nebo School District over the last 16 years has given me extensive budgeting experiences. We've pulled our hair out, we've wrung our hands, we've jumped for joy. There have been so many experiences over that 16-year period. And a lot of this goes back to local control. The State Board of Education can certainly be involved in oversight, but they have an opportunity to get those funds to the local educational agencies and help them have available to them what they need in order to provide the education they're seeking to provide for students in their district and school.
Following up on the oversight you mentioned, what accountability measures do you think that the state school board should use to ensure school districts and charter schools are using that money appropriately? Randy, you're first on this one.
Well, certainly the state school board sets standards that prepare students for colleges and careers. And then it's up to the LEA, the teachers, the parents, and the students to do the rest. We've got to hold those who get tax dollars accountable, but we do it in a way that gives flexibility at the local level. Students thrive when district and schools organizational operations are effective, and USBE would be providing internal audits designed to evaluate the effectiveness of governance and use of resources. And those kinds of audits are in place now and have been effectively taking care of the oversight portion. But I would like to encourage more helpful training when they discover that there are issues that they need to address in order to be more effective in the use of those resources that they're choosing to use in a certain way in their district.
Allison.
There was an audit that was published in this past December 2019 from the Office of Utah Legislative Auditor General, and it emphasized something that I've been concerned about for a long time, which is we're not very good in Utah at tracking compliance. We send the money out, accept the grants, and we are not very good at tracking what it is costing us to comply with the grants, with different programs. We're not tracking the funding, and in public education we have so many different funding sources. It comes attached to different legislation. We have federal grants and local grants and pilot programs, and I would really like to help implement the recommendations that they made in that audit. I think that would really help us have a better understanding of our cost benefit analysis, and maybe even forego some grants that are a net loss for us and free up the teachers who have so many reporting requirements. Another fact in the audit that was really interesting to me was they said that an average LEA has 339 reports that they have to turn in every year, and there's only 180 days in the school year, so there's a lot of redundancy there. I think the state board could really help streamline that and make things more efficient and use our resources more wisely.
Thank you both. Switching gears a little bit, another thing that was disrupted this year because of the coronavirus were the state mandated assessment tests. Do you think these should be resumed once things settle down? And even beyond that, do you think they are effective in evaluating success in areas of improvement for students? Allison?
No. I don't think that we should resume these tests. I think that we've had a number of years trying these tests and had some failures that are bigger than others. But even the testing company, the vice president himself in one of the reports said that what we're attempting to do by using a single test to evaluate both student performance and grade teachers and schools is not a valid use of a test. I think we have pinned too much on the assessments. I know this is not new to the people who have followed some of my other advocacy work, but I think we can, we are too test centric right now, and I think that we can improve on that. I'm not saying that there is no room for accountability, but I think we need to try something different.
Thank you. Randy, your response.
I couldn't agree more. There is a great need for review of the approach that we're taking with end-of-level testing. And if we were to resume them, we need to do a thorough review, make sure that they're appropriately aligned with the Utah content, that they are taking only limited time away from instruction rather than days, and that they are utilized primarily for the purpose of informing instruction. I love assessments. What a help for teachers to understand what their students are learning and how well they're mastering so they know what to do tomorrow. Are we reteaching? Or are we moving on? But I am a little bit bogged down, as I think many people in the state are bogged down with an unwieldy instrument that is not doing what it was designed to do.
Thank you. So there's been a lot of debate in recent years about how the state school board should be either elected or appointed, whether we should have nonpartisan races, partisan races, or if this is a position that the governor should appoint. Randy, you're the first one for this question. What do you think is the best way to choose people for the state school board?
Well, I've always loved parent involvement in education, and I really appreciate parents who are actively seeking to understand. I've had tons of them calling me on the telephone in recent weeks, and I'm thrilled to talk with them. And I'm hopeful that we'll continue to involve the parents in electing in some way those who will represent their various districts and their children at the state level. I believe that men and women on both sides of the aisle need to unite in that exhilarating challenge of educating America's future leaders. and parents can be involved in the selection of those people who will do that.
Allison.
I agree. I don't know that a lot of people know that for most of the recent history in Utah, that state school members weren't popularly elected, that they were selected by a committee who then put forth some names to the governor, who then picked 2 names to put on the ballot. And when people voted for the state school board, they were really picking between 2 names that had already kind of been chosen for them. Last election cycle was the first time we did open nonpartisan races, and this is the first time that I'm aware of that we're having partisan school board races. And I know that some people were concerned that it would make it too political. I think what it really does is it gives a chance for citizens to thoroughly vet the candidates. I do think it's a check on a really big system with a lot of moving parts, to have some electoral accountability at that state level that's directly accountable, like Randy said, to the parents and to the teachers and to the taxpayers. I'm really excited to be a part of this first partisan approach to electing school board members. And I hope that it doesn't increase the rancor, but that it really gives people a chance to get to know their state school board candidates a little better than they have in the past.
Thank you. So one of my questions is supposed to be, who do you believe should be the primary driver of education policy? But you've already both made it quite clear that you like local control. So I want to change the question a little bit. If you were elected to the state school board, how would you ensure that that local control exists while also having those necessary relationships with the school board, with the legislature, with the executive branch? Allison, you're first.
I think we have a good example in how we have charter schools. We have charter schools who set forth their own plans and how they're going to account for their plans, and there's still some statewide accountability, but I wonder why we can't do the same thing with LEAs and give them a little bit more flexibility for what they want to prioritize. I'm just not so sure why we have one size fits all when it comes to standards, which is a core role of the state board. I think the standards need to be more general and not dictate curriculum, and maybe a variety of assessments, or have different choices of assessments that align with that, so that we're not driving curriculum by the tests.
Randy.
I very much agree with what Allison has just suggested, that the local Board of Education needs to be in the driver's seat, and that the legislature, the governor, the charter schools, we need to be communicating with one another. I'm so excited about the possibility of increasing that communication, having conversations, heart-to-heart conversations with legislators about what our districts in our District 13 are wanting to have happen as they're educating the children of Utah. Finding ways to communicate with the executive branch so that we can be on the same page and we can be all fighting together for the best that we can possibly produce for Utah's kids. I think it's a great challenge and a wonderful opportunity.
Staying on this topic of relationships and team building, the state school board and the Utah State Legislature have had varying degrees of good and not so good relationships over the last decades. What would you specifically do to foster a positive relationship between the school board and the legislature? Randy.
Well, I've spent some time up on the Hill, and I've certainly participated in all the local town hall meetings and the Saturday morning Bills and Bagels experiences that we hold in our Nebo district offices. having worked with the incredible growth of the Mount Lana Applied Technology College, we've had a lot of interaction with legislators in the development of that campus at Thanksgiving Point and other campuses throughout the state. And I believe that these are good men and women who are really wanting to understand what is the best way. And I believe that our local leaders of learning in our LEAs, in our charter schools, in conjunction with our parents and teachers, have a lot to share. And I would love to find a forum through which we can open up those lines of communication and achieve the goals that we all have in our hearts, but sometimes they get pushed aside because of all the other demands on our time and resources.
Allison.
I think a familiarity with the legislative process is really key for a member of the state school board, and I've also developed that with my advocacy work on the Hill. I worked specifically on education bills. When the teacher pay and score was tied to the test scores, I lobbied for a bill that took that away. I didn't think that was a helpful metric. I worked with Representative Anderegg, who now Senator Anderegg, on the data privacy bill, sitting around a kitchen table in Lehigh with some other parents going through that bill. And I really think cooperative relationship and the relationships I have with the legislators is really useful. And I know that there has been some tension there in the past. I don't see that being an issue with me. I think that we all win when we can work together, and I will continue to develop and work on those relationships.
Thank you. Okay, our last question before we go to some of our audience questions. People love to post photos whenever we talk about not having enough funding for education of very old textbooks, and sort of that trope of some students are using textbooks that are older than they are. So how will you work to modernize public education and ensure Utah's students are ready to succeed in a technology-driven economy? Allison.
Well, certainly technology is a reality of the world that we are in. My first question is, if you get rid of those old textbooks, can I please have some? I have some experience in the homeschooling community, and I know that some of those older textbooks are really valuable because just the quality of the content. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't think that there's an inherent something being better just because it's modern or it's technology. I think that really the quality of the content is what we need to focus on, whether it's in a textbook, whether it's online. I don't think that just because something's digital makes it automatically better. And I think sometimes we get caught up in this push to make everything modern, and we sort of overlook the content that's coming along with the tech contract that we just signed, or who's reviewing that. The content is key. And I think that the quality of the content needs to be the focus, regardless of the platform on which it's being delivered.
Randy.
Those old textbooks have some happy memories, bring some happy memories to mind. I believe that the educator, the teacher in the classroom, is the key. And they can do some pretty darn good teaching with old textbooks. That's not to say that I'm suggesting we stay with the old textbooks, but I believe that that individual, and I think it's been proven through the COVID experience, that that teacher who is in the classroom and has not been over this period of time is the key to really making our materials, our lesson plans come alive for our students. And we came up with a wonderful plan, started several years ago in Nebo School District, where every content area is reviewed with participating star teachers from across the district and our leaders of learning at the district level and parents on each of the review committees. And it's rotated so that over a 6-year period, all content areas will be updated, reviewed, their assessments aligned, looking for new textbook adoptions or new online opportunities that will sustain the growth that we're experiencing. And I think that in that very careful framework of curricular review by parents, teachers, and leaders of learning, we can arrive at the materials and the resources that will be most helpful and best practice for our students.
Thank you both. Okay, we have some great audience questions. So this first one, Randy, you will answer first. From Kristen, I'm interested to know what each candidate thinks classrooms should look like on return from COVID-19, and what influence does the state school board have on those policies, or should it have on those policies?
I've been thrilled to observe our entire district staff, groups of faculty members, administrators in the various schools throughout the district, spending days and days in the recent week and a half or so, envisioning what that might look like. And I believe that what it's going to look like in Nebo is going to be different in Daggett and different in Wasatch and different in Ogden, Weber schools. And I believe that certainly our health officials and our state leaders are going to have some protocols in place and some helpful instructions that can be considered by the local districts. But I believe that the local districts are in a great position, having experienced what we've experienced the last 2 months. They're in a great position to be able to figure out what is going to work best for their local district and for the schools in their district.
Thank you. Allison.
Yeah, thank you, Randy, for pointing out one size does not fit all. We have such a diverse population in our schools, don't we? And I think that is just another argument for the decision making to be pushed closer to the student. I, as a parent, have a lot of concerns about kids returning to school in a really rigid environment, an environment that might feel a little scary. I think that we need to consider the mental health of the students, the environment that's conducive of learning, just as much as we do need to consider the germs or that kind of a thing. And from what I'm observing, it feels like the health department's kind of in the primary driver's seat. I would really like to see the state and especially the local boards and local teachers, listening to getting the best information they can from the health department, but working with the families and the local communities to be the final decision makers on what that looks like.
Thank you. So this next question looks pretty simple, but it's actually quite broad and very important. This is from Jennifer. I'm interested in your views on charter schools. Allison.
In general, I think that things that give parents and families choice is positive. I want parents to have as many educational opportunities available to them as possible, and that they can find the best fit for their student. I know with my own children, we've used charter schools, we've done homeschool at certain time, and primarily in public school, but I've been appreciative of having opportunities because the needs of my kids have been different. I understand the competition between public schools and charter schools. And again, I think some of that could be alleviated if our local schools could operate with some of the freedom of a charter. I think that we would resolve some of those issues. But the primary goal would be to give families a variety of choices that would fit their needs.
Thank you. Randy.
All of our efforts need to be focused on children and their needs, meeting their educational needs, their emotional, social needs, meeting their needs in terms of building confidence and gaining a vision for their future lives. And I say that any educational organization that can provide what that individual child needs ought to be supported and celebrated. I'm particularly interested in parents who sometimes make a much deeper commitment when they're a part of a charter school operation, because they're excited about the almost limitless possibilities that children in some charter situations are able to experience. I would like to see a lot more of that flexibility occur in our regular public school setting, where parents commit the time and energy and get involved, as they're always welcome to do. So with our leaders of learning and our teachers in our regular public schools, because we are doing a bang up job, in my opinion, of assessing individual student needs and meeting those needs as parents and teachers work together.
Thank you both. All right, our next question is from Taylor. In a state with teacher salary on the lower end of the spectrum and the cost of living rising, how can we entice quality teachers to teach here and stay so that we have experienced teachers? Randy.
Well, there's this thing that I've experienced through about 40 years of teaching. It's called the joy of learning and the joy of discovery. I can't think of anything more fun in my entire life than being in a classroom with a bunch of absolutely enthused, motivated students. And if we can provide more time for that to happen so that teachers are not so burdened down with those, how many, Allison, 300 and something reports that they've got to turn in, but they are focusing on student learning and student growth, reteaching, moving forward, excitement with the achievement of some, perplexed and concerned about those who are kind of struggling a little bit, finding ways to help them break through the barrier. I just think there is no way that you could keep people from wanting to teach if they can have more of that joy in their teaching experience. And certainly a good salary wouldn't hurt at all either.
Allison.
I agree. I didn't go into teaching because I thought it would make me rich. I love teaching, and I think I see that in a lot of teachers too, that they do it because they love what they do. But certainly it is a factor, especially if you're the primary salary for your family. I agree with Randy that just job satisfaction is a big factor, maybe as big a factor as the pay for our teachers here in Utah, and the state board can do a lot for that. The other factor is, though, pay. Every year I go to lots of town halls and the legislators will say we put this much more money into the public education pot. And it sounds like a really big number. They'll say the percentages. But what they don't say is that money was earmarked for a software program or a pilot program or a preschool program, and it actually didn't get into the classroom. And I really do think we need to prioritize the key people, our talent in the education system, and that investment will bring just really great dividends for us.
Thank you both. One other question we wanted to ask is, considering the political climate with police departments right now, do you think we need fewer safety resource officers in our schools? Allison.
I'm a little bit out of my element here, and so I will promise to study up on this, but because in the schools that I'm most familiar with, I don't see that presence at all. Certainly student safety is a top priority, but I can't speak to that, but I would love to study that and learn more about that.
Thank you. Randall.
We are blessed in Nebo School District. I apologize for continuing to come back to Nebo. I know there are a lot of other school districts, but this is my life and my experience so far. In Nebo School District, we are blessed with wonderful resource officers in our high schools, our junior highs. It's a wonderful cooperative venture between our local cities and our local schools. And to be able to feel the safety of having someone there who is concerned about our students. Many of our students look at them as friends who are very concerned and are there to help protect them and keep them in a safe learning environment. And so I have never felt any sense of awkwardness on the part of students, or heard any reports of anyone feeling like, oh, wow, maybe we shouldn't have that presence. We're just grateful to have that resource to bless the lives of our students.
Thank you.
Morgan.
Yes, please.
Sorry. Could I make one more little comment on that? I did think when Randy spoke that I have had some concern with a program that I've heard proposed a number of times for Utah County through law enforcement, and that is to a data collection element that would maybe profile kids that they thought had potential gang connections. And I just want to go on the record as being opposed to that kind of presence in the school or that kind of data profiling. That's all. Just want that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy, do you want to use any 30-second response time?
I would just like to say that we have one of the huge factors in safety for our children is privacy and protection. And it doesn't, we just simply cannot allow any outside entity to be infringing on the privacy and the safety of our children, and the parents' primary responsibility for keeping those kids safe. So I'm so grateful for parents who are active in helping us keep the FERPA guidelines and regulations and all of the other privacy initiatives that are protecting our children and allowing them to continue through their education without any kind of outside negative influences.
Thank you. Beyond the political climate with the police departments, we know that we are living in an increasingly partisan world, and school teachers often have to deal with tough subjects, and we expect that even more so after this summer as students return to school, and we'll have a lot of questions about what's been going on in the United States over the last 6 months. So I think we're on Randy for this next one. The question is, do you think teachers need additional training to help students have these tough conversations, especially using civil dialogue?
I'm a big believer in professional development and providing every resource and every methodology and pedagogy available from all of the best practices across the country and around the world to help our teachers communicate effectively and teach and help them learn to question and explore, so that they will begin to understand how perhaps 20 years down the road, their children are going to experience a greater level of equality, a greater level of respect, of kindness, of civility than we've been able to offer our children and grandchildren in the current situation.
Thank you. Allison.
For centuries, we had these conversations in our schools through the great works of literature and through history. I just finished teaching a Western Heritage class, and we ended up on the French Revolution. And there's so much to be learned that is current, that you can talk through a historical lens, through the lens of great literature, A Tale of Two Cities, or Les Mis, were the two different leveled books we learned for the different students. And one of my concerns with the Common Core language arts standards was the removal of classic literature and the focus on contemporary news articles and informational text. I think there's a great body of literature and research that shows just how much more effective and safe these conversations can be through some of these classic works. I think we can improve that. And I worry about trying to turn teachers into counselors or psychologists, or just addressing the trauma head on. I believe that we can have really mature conversations through these mediums that have been successful for many, many years, and we need to return to some of that.
Okay, thank you both. This will be our final question, and then we will move on to the closing statements. You've both talked about the importance of parent input. So if you were elected to the board, can you describe to me how you would actively invite parents to participate in your work on the board? Allison.
So this is what I've been doing for the last 10 years with grassroots activism, built up a lot of different coalitions and mailing lists. I'm really passionate about informing people of the issues and keeping them engaged in a way that is not overbearing. During the legislative session, there's hundreds of bills coming, there's so much, and people are busy. They go to work, they have their kids to raise. And so I think one of my strengths is focusing in on key issues and communicating with that people. I certainly will make myself available and accessible to people for these conversations, but I plan to continue not only listening to people, but communicating through my social media directly. I think increasing that communication between the board and the public will be a great strength.
Thank you. Randy.
There are so many issues that could benefit from the input of interested and concerned parents. Allison mentioned in a recent podcast that I was listening to that when she was serving on the test review board for the SAGE test, that the time was very limited. They had thousands, 10,000 questions they had to go over such a short period of time. There really wasn't time to accomplish what needed to be accomplished. So she walked away from that experience feeling a little bit like, okay, well, we had some input, but there's a whole world out there that was not yet discovered or even mentioned in our deliberations together. I would like to come up with a strategic plan that involves parents in every level of collaboration for change and for planning, for curriculum, for safe schools, in every area. I would like to make sure, though we can't take huge chunks of people's time, I want there to be enough time to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish so that we can honestly consider their input and make sure that it is a part of the discussion rather than, okay, we've listened, now let's move on. I want to really, I value the ideas and the commitment of these parents, and I feel it's an honor to share in their commitment with these children and want to help support them in their efforts to make good futures for those kids.
Thank you both so much for joining us this debate. Oh, Allison, did you want to respond to that?
I did. I just want to say, Randy, don't you agree that one of the ways to make that possible is to not have so many decisions, not have a test that only 10 parents on it or 15 parents on a panel can see, not have to go to the state level or even the federal level to have input in your child's education. The way to get parents involved is to allow them to make a difference in their own communities.
Exactly.
Okay. I'll take it that was the response time that you wanted, Randy.
That's it.
Perfect. All right, we are to closing statements, and Randy, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. One of the key experiences that I had as I was a new board member years ago was to share with a group of parents throughout our various communities in Nebo School District a program called Kids Count. We spent an evening, 2 or 3 hours together, where we just reviewed all of the areas of concern, all of the things that we care about, all of our hopes for our children. And we had to come up with some very specific plans, and we had to agree, and we walked around the room and put our plans and our ideas up on the wall with little post-it notes, and we shared conversations and moved around to different tables. And we had such a delightful experience discovering together what we might want to do for the children in Nebo School District. We repeated that experience a couple years later, and again, a couple more years later. And we have found that sharing together the responsibility of educating tomorrow's leaders and tomorrow's adults is such an exhilarating and wonderful privilege. And I'm excited to share my experience and the love that I have for education and for the students that we're serving through this opportunity to serve on the state school board, District 13. And I'm hoping that tonight's conversation may have helped you catch a glimpse of my passion and love for education and for the job that we're doing together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy. Allison.
I agree. Education really is about the kids. And I think we need to remember that they're not our collective kids, the state's kids or the nation's kids. I mean, they are in a sense, but truly they are the stewardship of the parents and the families. And one of my priorities is to honor that. Sometimes I feel like public education in Utah is kind of caught in a turf war. There's the side that looks at the school as a workforce pipeline, and we're going to collect data and sort the kids and plan our programs based on workforce alignment and productivity. And it's kind of a factory model that rubs me wrong as a mother. And then on the other side, there's this kind of social justice side where we look at our schools like any social ill, we're going to go into our schools and try to nip it in the bud by asking our teachers to be psychiatrists and social workers and collect medical data and all sorts of things. And I think that we really need to take a step back and say, what happened to self-determination? What happened to education being about what works for each individual student? As a mother, I want that for my children. As a teacher, I want to meet each kid in the classroom wherever they are and help them to progress. And as a citizen, I want students to come out of school with the education that they need to do whatever they want. I want them to be able to have access to the opportunities that they value. And that's how I will set my priorities. Thank you very much for having us tonight.
Thank you once again, Allison Williams and Randy Booth, our candidates for the District 13 State School Board primary election. And we'd once again like to thank the members of the Utah Education Debate Coalition, KSL, the Utah Association of Public Charter Schools, the Hinckley Institute of Politics, the Sutherland Institute, and the United Way. Thank you everyone for joining us, and good night.
Thank you, Morgan. Thanks, Randy. Good to see you.
Thank you. It's great to visit with you.